Yes, welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton. Once again, having a lively conversation with a business communication expert. And when you and I listen to the tips and strategies that are provided in this conversation, we will have wonderful ideas, concepts, and strategies and action steps for our own business. Today, it's a delight to welcome Beverly Lewis, coming to us from Northwest Florida. As a master communicator, Beverly helps develop confident business leaders who are consistent in their character and clear in their communication. She brings decades of experience to the table. She's well-traveled, well-read, well-spoken, and exudes energy and positivity, which I'm sure we will see. Beverly says and teaches that the quality of life depends on the quality of our relationships. And our relationships start one conversation at a time. Beverly delivers straight talk with an irresistible smile and leaves audacious hope in her wake. My gosh, how much we all need audacious hope. I'm glad to get in that wake today, and I'm sure you are too. As we bring Beverly onto the Biz Communication Show now, first, let's welcome her. Hello, Beverly.
Hi, thanks for having me, Bill.
Okay, and the first thing I'd like to do is to ask you to mention your book, which I know will be helpful to our viewers and listeners.
Thank you. I did write a book called Win from Within, The Heart of Success and Significance. And this book really does talk about EQ, which I know we'll be talking about today, emotional intelligence, in a very simple way. I have to be truthful. I think that most business books are boring. And I read just all the time, but I find that a lot of business books are hard to finish. So my goal was
second that motion. I agree.
So I really wanted to write one that was easy to read. It can be read on a flight, cross-country flight, and it can then be referenced chapter by chapter if you kind of want to brush up on respect or trust or fear or, any of those things. There is chapter by chapter is standalone. So thank you for asking about it.
Well, thank you. And that's available on Amazon?
Yes, it is.
All right. Thank you very much. We have some fascinating topics that we need to cover. We want to cover today, Beverly. And first of all, you mentioned emotional intelligence, EQ. We probably all heard about it, but we really would appreciate it if you could define it for us and tell us how it can be relevant for us, both in our business life and our professional life.
My pleasure. The simple definition is it's the ability to recognize and understand our own emotions and how they affect our communication, and also recognize those in others. So there's an internal and an external EQ, and they're not necessarily related. But why it's important is it's now been recognized in research that it's the most in-demand leadership quality in leading today, because it has everything to do with relational ability to develop relationships, build a healthy company culture, get along with people. It's very foundational. And to put it to numbers, the people who have high EQ earn an average of $29,000 more per year. And as a leader, it's really fascinating to realize that a Gallup poll shows that people who have a high EQ supervisor are 4 times less likely to leave the company. So you can see there's just massive implication in terms of dollars and cents, but yes, in terms of those important relationships that having healthy communication influences our families, our communities, our businesses, and onward.
Very well stated. I have for decades been administering DISC and helping people understand their DISC profiles, which does very much the same thing. It helps you to see yourself, and then it helps you to learn how to see others in an in-depth way, which does increase our effectiveness and relationships and our own well-being. How did you get interested in this?
Well, I started doing training and owned my own business decades ago. So it was both. In fact, really the reason I started doing training is that I started speaking in the process of developing my own business in the community. And I found out I was good at it. People started asking to pay me to come and do training for their staffs.
God
And
bless them. God bless them.
yes, yes. But I also have to say that it's a personal thing because I am a musician and I have always been influenced by sound. I always have joked that music is my first language and English is my second language. And it's fascinating to me. My father was an orchestra, a symphony director. He also played,
Wow.
yeah, he played the instruments, but without making a sound, through leadership, he could direct the talents of hundreds of people to create a life-changing, beautiful impact. And that was always an image to me of what leadership should be because we have such an intellectual culture and it's become more so with the abundance of data. The fact that we've got the world at our fingertips, literally in terms of information. But as our information has increased, our connection with our heart has decreased. And actually, that is backed by research also. It shows that young people, IQ, which is, of course, your intelligence quotient, IQ has gone up in the younger generation. EQ has gone down.
I would
So,
imagine, although it may be too early to tell, but I would think that the isolation that we've had during uh, COVID, I would think that has impacted our EQ.
yes, it certainly has. I think yes, because especially for those of us who love to connect with people and are so relational, just having that separation has been a challenge. But I think here's the great news about EQ: you can always raise it. IQ can actually, they used to think that IQ was static, and it is not. Now we know about neuroplasticity and the ability to develop new brain cells and develop new neural pathways. But the great news is you can always raise your EQ. So wherever you're starting from now, you can always get better. And I love that. I love that about this. It's a skill. It can be practiced and worked on. And the fruit of taking the time to be intentional about developing it is rich and sweet.
Well, Beverly, I know you and I are new acquaintances, and among the things we don't have in common is music talent. I remember quite painfully that my parents insisted that I take piano lessons for 6 years, and they let me quit when I finally found middle C. so, so I don't have the musical talent that you have, but that doesn't stop me from appreciating EQ. Now, your mention of IQ brings up, I believe, something that definitely we need to talk about. And that is many of us, when we are in our formative years, and especially when we get to college or even to graduate school, we are so intent on proving that we have a high IQ. And we do that by working very diligently and trying to get A's instead of B's or B's instead of C's. And yet, when you and I think back to the people that we graduated with in high school or in college, and maybe we look at a yearbook And we see the ones who were most likely voted most likely to succeed. It's not very predictable, I think, that those would have been the people with the high IQ. Even back then, we did not necessarily think that the scholars and the geniuses would be the most likely to succeed. We had a sense, even though we didn't know what it was all about as we do now, we had a sense even then that how we relate, as you say, to ourselves, how we understand ourselves and how we understand others is the key not only to success with others, but success with ourselves. Wasn't it a statement of Socrates that the beginning of wisdom is understanding yourself, I think?
Yes, yes. And interestingly enough, again, there's research. There was a study done of Harvard Ph.D. people, tracked them through their lives over a period of about 40 years. And those that had high EQ, they all had high IQ. Those that had high EQ were 4 times more successful, financially, relationally, um, in terms of all the parameters that they measured. So I have to mention that a very crucial part of EQ is self-awareness. There's a funny thing about self-awareness. The the reality is about 95% of people say they are self-aware. Whether it's that they've taken the DISC profile like you mentioned, whether it's because they just feel like they're paying attention, they're smart, so they feel self-aware. But there's an organizational psychologist that has written a recent book called Insight that says that 12 to 15% of people actually are. So it's actually the reality that kind of spells out that about 80% of us go through each day lying to ourselves, which is a little bit alarming. I feel like one of the answers to that, you can say, how do you become more self aware? Asking the right questions, being curious, and also paying attention to how other people respond to us, because that's where a lot of people claim to be self-aware. But you know th- the old the old model of a boss that was a tyrant and came in and ruled by fear and intimidation.
And won't work now.
No, those days are gone. They're gone. And now people want empathy. They want a boss that they can trust. They want psychological safety when they go to work, which I define, that's a fancy word for saying that you can trust that nobody's going to throw you under the bus and shame you and make you feel bad. People want those things more than they want a raise, and that's the truth.
And the old phrase, because I said so, that that is obsolete. That is
It is.
very much obsolete. And you and I have been in the workforce long enough to have seen that old style boss who, instead of being a manager, was really a boss. And that absolutely has fortunately faded into the sunset. If that person came into an organization now, they would have a very short stint there. And speaking of organizations, we have time for a very important question, and only one more question. But that question is, let's say I'm a manager and I hear about what you do, Beverly, and I believe it would be beneficial for my organization. So I contact you. What is it you would say about how you would come in and work with my organization to help us with our EQ understanding?
Well, one of the things I would do is work with you, Bill, and bring you in so that you could do the assessment part, because those assessments are very important. And I actually do that too. But also, I am very big on teaching lead from within is one of my courses that, we can't lead others well until we lead ourselves well. So that self-awareness, then understanding the fundamentals of emotional quotient, connecting with trust, respect. A crucial thing that I teach is courageous conversations. I think that is something that we all have to practice. None of us have really had these skills taught in our formal education. And so those are some of the things that I work on with teams.
And I would suggest, I would think that this not only would help someone in their professional life, but it could be a great boon for families, couldn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. I have learned as much from being married for over 40 years as I have from any business relationship. In fact, really a lot more, because any long-term relationship is going to take work. It takes courageous communication. It takes forgiveness. It takes respect. It takes all of the basics apply in whatever sector you might be, whether it's education, business, family, politics. Oh, Lord, do we need more EQ in politics?
Politics is a topic we don't have time to discuss. It would take many hours.
Good.
And all
Yes,
we would do is offend a lot of people anyway.
that's right.
Okay, Beverly, these insights that you have given us are marvelous. And one word comes to mind as we're closing, and it seems to me a starting point with understanding EQ is introspection.
True. Yes, that is a very good place to start. I would call it self-awareness, but it's the same thing, really. And again, I just challenge all of my clients with the fact that, we no longer have to have all the answers, because there's the information flow just is too rapid, but we do need to learn to ask the right questions. So to your point for introspection, yes, asking the right questions about ourselves and about others can go a long way to building healthy relationships.
And speaking of questions, I know there are people who will have questions to ask you who want to follow up with you. So, Beverly, please give us your contact information.
Sure. My website is beverlyspeaks.com. Beverly is spelled Beverly, and it's beverlyspeaks.com. And my email is beverly@beverlyspeaks.com. I do have a handout. If people want to know, I have a podcast called The High Road to Leadership. And in that, I give people a path for the attributes necessary for effective leadership in 2022. And that is a free handout that if you want to email me, beverly@beverlyspeaks.com, I'd be happy to send that to you.
Well, one of the first emails you'll get is from me because I certainly want to see that. And you have prompted me to learn much more about EQ, emotional intelligence. It's a very vital way to improve our interpersonal and our business relationships to make our life so much fuller, more enjoyable, and more productive. Any closing 20-second comment?
I always tell people the best is yet to come. I believe leaders are dealers in hope. And if I can help you toward that best, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for this opportunity to talk with you today, Bill. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for being with us. And since Beverly has shared her contact information, I'm delighted to share mine for those of you who are with us on YouTube or on the podcast. I'm Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. So logically, my website is bizcommunicationguy.com. Invite you to go there, check my services for corporations and leaders, and give me a contact so that we can talk about your communication problems and challenges and how I can assist you in meeting them. Again, thanks to Beverly for being with us today. Thanks to those of you who joined us on YouTube and on the podcast. Be with us again next week when I host another business professional who will help us with our communication. I'm Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy.